All right, I'm hanging out with Greg Nutter today, and we're talking about P3 selling. Greg, what does P3 mean?
P3 are the three elements that a B2B seller needs to focus on if they want to maximize their success. Three areas, and I just happen to start with the letter P. The first one is problems. What problems can you solve for your customers? The second P is people. Who has those problems? And the last one is process. What's their buying decision process? Rather than the selling process, how is the customer or prospect going to go out making a decision to purchase a product like yours?
Who's the primary audience for P3 selling and its concepts?
There are three. First one is the brand new seller right out of school, never had any sales training. So it's a foundational book to tell you, here are the best practices if you really want to succeed as a B2B seller. Second one is someone's been around a while, perhaps been very successful, but lost their mojo at some stage and needs a refresher, getting back to basics. And the third one is sales managers who want a process that's scalable, repeatable, that they can use to manage their sales teams.
Greg Nutter wrote P3 Selling. Make sure you check the link in the show notes so that you can pick up your copy of P3 Selling. Thanks for being with us today, Greg.
Thanks, Doug.
Here's what you get with this episode of The Nice Guys on Business.
So ultimately, what you need to do to be able to kind of scale and grow the company is kind of stay focused on the bigger picture, focused on the stuff that you're really good at, and build a team around you to be able to support so that you really complement one another.
The Nice Guys on Business are putting the band back together. They're on a mission from God. Running a business is hard. Being a business leader is even harder. The Nice Guys bring in top industry pros to help your business prosper in a tough world. Get real advice from real people to get you real results today. Now it's time for the Nice Guys on Business. Here's your hosts, Doug Sandler and Strickland Bonner.
Nice Guy community. Today our guest is Chris Gwinn, and he's the founder and CEO of Great Lakes Advisory. Chris has built his company around documenting processes, standard operating procedures, instructional design, training, and getting everyone aligned. Now, you guys know through listening to us, maybe in some cases for years, that you know that this was one of the stumbling blocks for me and Strick as we got started with TurnKey. We have figured out some of those, but we kind of did this from the very beginning. We didn't hire a pro. We didn't bring in anybody that actually specializes in this. I'm excited to talk to Chris today. Build the right system and watch your profits go up as your workload goes down. That's cool. Excited to talk about this today with Chris. Chris, welcome to the Nice Guys on Business podcast.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Hey, I love having you here. I want to start with kind of the beginning stages. Why do most people not understand that systems, you have to have systems and processes and procedures in place in order for your business to be scalable, duplicatable, all the things that everybody just wants to do kind of a little bit of everything. Is that what you're finding with any organization that you walk into, or what's happening?
I think within the infancy of a lot of organizations, there's always this mentality that if you need to do it right, you got to do it yourself. And many times it's the business owner and the founder of that organization that really are the company at the very beginning. They're the only person that's serving their customers, the only person that's selling to their customers, the only person that's basically they're wearing multiple different hats. And many times it's very challenging for them to actually let go of the vine and actually delegate those responsibilities and actually have someone else service those customers, because hey, I'm concerned that they're not going to treat my customers the way that I would normally treat them. But ultimately, your time is finite. You can't change the number of hours in a given day or in a given week. And so there comes a point in time where you kind of reach a plateau that this is the max that I basically tapped out of. This is the most output that I can actually accomplish in a given week. And to be able to actually scale the organization beyond just you need to be able to create a structure of systems and processes and create standard operating procedures that really guide all of the actions and decisions to create repeatable outcomes within your organization.
All right, so help me with it just a little deeper. I know I said here I'm about to contradict exactly what I said before I hit record. I'm like, hey, we're not going to go too deep because I really want people to understand what we're talking about. But one of the things that's so challenging is there's so many organizations, and I'll color us guilty to in the beginning of putting this together, is we had some really good systems in place, but we had no documentation of the systems itself. So for us, even though my partner and I, again, you hit it right on the head, we were doing everything. We were the chef, the cook, the bottle washer, everything along the way. The challenge was that we had nobody else that was in here. We knew exactly what we were doing, but man, we were working our tails off and we weren't teaching anybody this. So how do you make the transition from having a company understand the system they have in place to actually documenting it? And then how do you document actually what's going on?
Well, I think the first step is figuring out what are you actually what are some of the responsibilities or key areas of accountability that only you can perform. I mean, there's going to be some tasks or some workflows or some level of service that really fits or falls underneath only your core level of expertise, but there's probably going to be some other tasks that might actually fall below your pay grade. And now many business owners and many folks don't consider that actually when you perform those tasks that are below your pay grade, the cost to actually perform that task actually becomes more expensive because there's an opportunity cost with your time. And so the first place to start is usually some of the more repetitive tasks that if you follow a series of steps, you'd always be able to achieve the same outcome, maybe such as running a report on kind of overtime hours, or potentially maybe kind of creating some other kind of maybe a financials, or maybe setting up maybe an ad somewhere, or maybe kind of putting out or kind of sending out or scheduling some of your social media posts, or maybe in your world, maybe kind of reaching out to some potential podcast guests, something along those lines that, hey, it wouldn't really make a difference for the level of our service, but it would actually free up a lot of my time. And so the first place to really start and when documenting your processes is figuring out what can you offload off of your plate to keep you focused on really the bigger vision of your organization, and actually remove some of the repeatable tasks that you're constantly or maybe frequently performing. And so I think the first step is really just identifying what those responsibilities, what some of those tasks are, and trying to kind of come up with that list of maybe these are the tasks that occur very frequently that many times you don't particularly like maybe enjoying them or actually performing them, and you could actually delegate those to someone else.
What do you say to the person, the company owner, the entrepreneur, the business owner that says to you, well, I will bring in somebody to handle my bookkeeping as soon as I can afford to bring in somebody to handle my bookkeeping? Because I know that a lot of people that are listening to our show, bootstrapped entrepreneurs that may not have, and maybe in early stages, so that they don't have the capacity to spend the money. What do you tell somebody that is not in a position financially to make that leap to bring somebody on to do that task?
Well, I think the first step is, if you're not in the financial position, I think you never want to put yourself where you're potentially financially burdening the company by pursuing some additional external resources. So there's always the opportunity to not even bring someone on full-time, but there are part-time capacity bookkeepers. And I think you need to also just weigh the opportunity cost of, well, is bookkeeping really underneath your core expertise? And if it's not, well, you might actually be spending a lot more time performing the bookkeeping than someone else, right, and valuing what is your time and what could you be doing maybe from a revenue generating capacity, or maybe from a client service capacity, or maybe just from an overall productivity capacity with the amount of time that you're spending with, say, for hypothetically bookkeeping. And if you start to look at some of the, partial or kind of outsourced bookkeepers, there's a lot of very manageable bookkeepers out there that doesn't necessarily require you to bring on someone full time. And certainly when you're first starting off, it's probably a little bit overkill to even bring on a full-time bookkeeper, but someone to even just help reconcile the books and prepare maybe your payroll. You can certainly find someone for a couple $100 a month. And right, when you weigh that compared to maybe how many hours you're spending on actually completing on those tasks, usually there's a pretty significant ROI on there.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, in 2019, I can remember sitting down having a great conversation with my partner Strickland and talking about, we had just read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks and talking about staying in your zone of genius. And the zone of genius for Strickland was definitely in the systems and processing and building thing, big picture kind of guy. And I was more in the relationship build, selling, consultative, being the strategist of the group. And nowhere along the way did a spreadsheet ever enter my life, and in no way in his life did a sales conversation ever come into the equation. And yet we were both doing the things that we hated to that regard. We were spending more time doing things that we didn't like, and I wouldn't say that our income was suffering as a result of it, but what ended up happening was we were putting more hours and making less money. When we gave up those things, all of a sudden we said, "Hey, look, we're spending or investing money in a bookkeeper and an accountant and these other things." But we actually are making more money since we've been investing this. So I would just love your spin on that. The personality in the seat of that, especially the CEO or the person running the organization, when you do these things that you don't like to do, but you're doing them because you just don't want to bring on anybody, the attitude has got to affect your revenue and your bottom line as well. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, you brought that up and it made me think of, I don't know if you're familiar with Vern Harnish or kind of EO, but there's Vern Harnish has a book, it's called Scaling Up, and it's kind of based around a lot of the Rockefeller habits. And something that's really cool within, I'm kind of pulling from this framework, but they have kind of a quadrant within the book that basically, it's kind of essentially like a tic-tac-toe kind of quadrant. And at the top of it, you kind of write like to do, and then right next to it, you're like good at. And then there's like don't like to do and not good at. And it's essentially the part that you're trying to remove from you is really you don't like to do it and you're not good at these tasks. Right. And ultimately, what you want to get to the point where you're only focusing and actually performing the work that you are really good at and that you actually like to do. And that's where I think structuring your business and making sure that you have the right people in the right seats and are built around kind of your kind of level of core genius and kind of within your expertise really increases the overall satisfaction of running your organization. I mean, most of the business owners that are probably listening to this episode, they didn't just start a business or kind of start a company because, hey, I just want to do more work that I could have been doing with probably less risk of even running a company. I mean, ultimately, they saw a vision and an opportunity with their organization to be able to really make a difference within their industry. And it really typically is not just to do a lot of the type of work that they don't want to do. And so ultimately, what you need to do to be able to kind of scale and grow the company is kind of stay focused on the bigger picture, focused on the stuff that you're really good at, and build a team around you to be able to support so that you really complement one another.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And Nice Guy community, hang on for just a little bit longer, because one of the gifts that Chris is going to give to you guys is a free actionable guide, 10 actionable steps to systemize your business and fast track your growth. And we'll make sure that you have access to that. But just hang on for a few moments, because I want Chris to give him an opportunity to talk a little bit about Great Lakes Advisory. And how did you know that, like, I like I like eating, but I don't want to own a restaurant. You probably are good at systems. When did you realize that this is the thing that you wanted to do, and this was your gift to be able to give back to other people as well as a career?
Yeah, it all started probably a little over kind of 8-9 years ago. At the time, I was in a completely different industry, but at the same time, my dad is a business owner and was really struggling to keep his head above water. He was constantly putting out fires, dealing with internal issues, employees not following tasks the correct way, employee turnover, you name it. Overall, it was a struggle. And so he approached me and asked me if I wouldn't mind taking a look at some of his operations to see if there's any opportunity to make the business a little bit easier to manage. And I mean, he's my dad. I've got a lot of loyalty towards family. So I was more than happy to take a look. But as I began to dissect their operations, interview some of their employees, I quickly come to find out that they had absolutely zero documented standard operating procedures, zero defined processes, and zero formalized training of any sort. It was essentially throw the employees to the wolves and see if they can figure it out on their own. And so to me, intuitively, it made a lot of sense why employees weren't following tasks the correct way. I'm using quotation marks here because there really wasn't a correct way to be able to do anything because nothing was actually defined. And so my first thought process around trying to make this business a little bit easier to manage was that if we can clearly define all the processes within the organization and create standard operating procedures that would outline the step-by-step instruction leading to a specific result or outcome, and then build training around those processes, standard operating procedures, responsibilities, and built it all out in one centralized location, that hopefully this would make the business a little bit easier to manage because all the underlying employees would be better prepared to be able to fulfill all of their responsibilities. And so took it upon myself to facilitate all of those interviews, gain a deep understanding of exactly how the business operates, capturing all of those responsibilities, and building it all out in a learning management system and really kind of a training kind of playbook application. And then fast forward, I just saw the incredible impact on operations, the business owner, the entrepreneur, management, leadership, and realized that there was a much larger need for the solution outside of his business. So I opened up Great Lakes Advisory a little over 4 years ago and now to address this specific need and better serve small businesses out there.
When do you find it's a good time to bring in the type of thing that you do? You know, is there a too early? Is there there's probably never a too late. You always need to, to bolster what you got going on in your company. But when's optimal?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that there's ever a too late. I think that there's, I even talked to, I guess I'm not going to name any names, but I know that I know someone else works at a very large organization, and I think it's over a 2,000 person or employee organization. Wow. And they don't have that. So I would say that's definitely, there's never too late, and you can always kind of get started no matter how large your organization is. But as far as maybe too early, I think the good point to kind of at least start this process, and you don't have to necessarily use me. While if you need some guidance and need some help getting this all set up, you certainly can reach out to Great Lakes Advisory. But I think when you start to grow outside of just the founder, maybe just the partner, and you're starting to actually bring on employees, I think that's really probably the best starting point, and kind of doing a little bit of a callback to the earlier part in our conversation when you're starting to kind of identify some of those tasks that you want to delegate, kind of get off your plate that maybe aren't the best fit for your core level of expertise, or kind of maybe fall outside of your wheelhouse and maybe lower your overall productivity, or maybe are below your pay grade, and you want to start kind of moving those off. I think that that's really, you don't necessarily have to tackle this all at once, and especially as your business grows and as many times these processes do tend to evolve. It's somewhat of an evergreen process. So you don't have to feel as if, hey, we need to get everything done at once. We need to we're only a two-man shop, or a two-person shop rather, and we need to document all of these departments that maybe don't even exist yet. I think the best place is just start to document the training, the SOPs for the parts where you need to kind of offload that and delegate that to someone else. And then you can continue to build off those processes from there.
I'm curious, just because as you were saying that, I was stepping my organization into the process that you were putting together. I'm thinking, we have a lot of great systems in place, and we have each one as kind of like a tentacle, but I don't know that we have overall like an employee procedure manual. I know we don't have an overall procedure manual. Does it make sense? And in what sense does it make sense to do something like that? Because, while I think, hey, we got this thing tied in pretty good, and we've got our systems locked in nicely, and we do have a well-defined product. We understand who our market is. We know what the offers that we're making. We understand our messaging, but we don't have it all kind of put together. And I know that at some point, if we ever determine that we're going to sell this company, having it even more locked in would probably make a lot of sense. Again, love your opinion, just to get some feedback from you on that.
Well, I think the original question was kind of, maybe if you're too early, that it is probably a little bit too premature to kind of capture all of those
Yeah.
processes at that level. But I think once you start to get to the point where, hey, I've started to offload all of these tasks and truly actually remove myself from the operations, then kind of pulling from Michael E. Gerber's E-Myth, you start to actually work on your business.
Right.
And working on your business is really kind of understanding all the different moving parts and how these systems intertwine and are actually connected with one another. And I think it's at that stage when you start to build out a couple of different departments, you are maybe a little bit more removed from your operations, where you can take a deeper look from more of a high level. And that's where we help organizations develop out those process maps, which really help you to identify all the different moving parts of all of your systems, who does what, all the different decisions. And it's from there that you can actually identify some of the non-value add components of those processes to see if you can actually optimize them. But I think if you ever were to consider potentially selling your operations or actually selling your entire organization, I think getting all that in place, getting all that stuff documented, it does ultimately increase the overall valuation of your company. Because if I'm an acquirer and I'm going to buy Doug's studio over here, well, as the acquirer, I need to understand exactly how you operate your studio. I need to understand exactly how you put on each of these podcasts and how you kind of are able to grow your entire audience and better serve your entire community that you've built out. And if you can't teach me, well, you need to stick around for a lot longer and show me the entire ropes. But if you can show me, hey, here's all the documentation, here's everything is properly laid out, explained, this is basically a recipe for success to be able to manage this entire operations. Well, it doesn't necessarily trivialize your worth, but it actually allows it to be a more seamless, easier transition and handoff from an acquirer standpoint.
No, I have no problem trivializing my worth and stepping out of my business. The less work that I actually have to do, the more successful my company I have found actually becomes. I've so far removed myself from so many of the systems. Now they all know that I'm here, but many of them know their jobs much better than I could ever consider doing. The only step that I got to get to, and we just haven't, either been in a position to find someone to do this or understand, okay, well, what does it take, is the selling side of it. I do all of the selling for my organization, and most of my business comes through referral. So they're more warm leads than they are cold outreach, cold marketing. So I love the idea. Just to give you the 12-second commercial, we own a podcast production company. It's not just our podcast, but we produce about 70 or 75 other shows. So for us, it's the whole production, the launch, everything that goes into this. And the show is just our opportunity to, do what we teach other people that we do, so that they can see, well, you have 1,300 episodes. You probably have been in this game for quite some time, which I love. From a business perspective, I'm really curious. Thanks for letting me just bore you there a little bit with my backstory. From a business perspective, as a guy that's running his own company, and you just said you'd been doing this for about 4 years, what's some of the stuff that you are still working on as a business owner yourself when it comes to your own systems and your own processes? Because it's got to be hard. I mean, like from a production perspective, we feel like sometimes we are the cobbler's kids. We don't have all of the best things that we give to our clients. So what are some of the things that you're still working on from a systems perspective for your company?
Some of the system stuff, I mean, we changed. I guess we're pretty nimble in how fast we're kind of changing, but I would say it's mostly around kind of some of the people aspects and kind of getting all the right people into some of the seats where we kind of, I'm actually still slowly removing myself from the operations.
Yep.
And kind of getting out of some of the day-to-day operations and being able to delegate some of those responsibilities. So that's still some of the stuff that we're kind of working on, as well as just finding better ways to be able to add more value to our customers. I think that those are still the things that we're always trying to constantly improve. And I think that we do a really, really good job so far, but I think that there's always an opportunity to add more value to our customers. And I guess I have a lot of great aspirational growth and profitability goals, but I one of my biggest goals is just making Great Lakes Advisory the best place to work and ranking on that Inc. list for the best places to work. And so I think constantly trying to improve our employee satisfaction and make Great Lakes Advisory a place that everyone's excited to work at every single day is something I focus on.
I love that you say get the right people on the bus. We always talk about that. You know, we have a certain culture that we have here at TurnKey. And I think oftentimes, you know, people that come to us from another production company or they come to us understanding what they think the environment is about are really surprised because we do have such a laid back, cool environment, but we treat the customer experience. I mean, that's our unique value proposition is making sure that our customer expectations are exceeded and then another 120% beyond that. We don't want to be a commodity. And then you mentioned another great thing, which is just making sure that you're adding an extreme amount of value to the services that you provide. Well, these are the 10 deliverables that we are saying that we are going to deliver. Hey, here's another 2 or 3 that we're going to add just because we know that it's something important to most of our customers. We're not charging you for these. We just know that it's something of value. High risk or low risk, high reward kind of things for us is great. Spend just a second talking about the 10 actionable steps to systemize your business and fast track your growth, the giveaway that we have for our Nice Guy community today. What made you discover that these were the actionable steps that you think were the most important to put in this document, and walk me through just maybe 1 or 2 of them if you have a moment to do that.
Yeah, of course. Well, these are actually more or less the same exact framework that we follow. And so it kind of all starts with just mapping out your process, documenting your core processes, policies, how-to information, tribal knowledge, developing out those SOPs, kind of recording some of those videos to be able to communicate some of the complex tasks, creating those checklists, those templates, those helpful resources for your employees, and just establishing accountability through employee performance goals, and then kind of storing all this information in one learning management application. So there's a couple of different additional steps there. So I'll kind of leave that as a teaser, but this is really kind of the framework that we follow and thought it would be really helpful to share with your audience today.
Well, you certainly are the expert's expert when it comes to this. I mean, I probably would have been better equipped to have a guy like Strickland on here who is a huge systems guy, but I think taking a dummy's perspective like I have and asking you questions about it is probably great for my community, because oftentimes I'll get lost in the weeds. He'll start explaining something to me from a systems perspective, and I'm like, as long as the system works and you've got it documented, I don't need to know how it works. So I appreciate you sharing your expertise on the show today, and thanks for being here on the Nice Guys.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Doug.
Nice Guy community, never underestimate the power of nice. Again, special thanks to Chris Gwinn. All of his information, including access to that document, 10 actionable steps to systemize your business and fast track your growth, will be right there in the show notes. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. You know, I've done opens and closes for these bozos for 400 plus episodes. I've moved, I've had plastic surgery, I keep renewing the restraining order, but nothing has worked. They keep on finding me.